Current state of Rome's Lake. Arrowhead, Camelot, Sherwood are impoundment lakes. Their sources, as Don mentioned, approximately 75% comes 14 Mile Creek. And Spring Branch used to contribute 20. Probably due to Icap wells up there. It's intermittent now. And the possibility of water came in from Spring Branch. It could be potentially contaminated water anyway. Peatwell flowage is primarily fed by the river, Wisconsin River, and with some influence from the 14 Mile Creek. 3 of our 4 lakes on the DNR impaired list. We found phosphorus in Arrowhead and Sherwood. In Peatwell, we found phosphorus, PCB, dioxin, and mercury in Peatwell. I can tell you a little story about Peatwell. When I was still working at Lake Arrowhead, we had an outing at the lake course. And I got a call at home that night, and they said, Bob, I think our septic system is backing up. And so I went over to the lake course and checked the system. And we found out it was the smell coming from the Peatwell flowage. Now, whatever that distance was, a mile, 2 miles. Okay. So it's coming into Arrowhead, and just from all the algae on our lake. And I know that Rick Jorgensen, who's not here today, is working with his group to clean up Peatwell. And Tri-Lakes has been testing for phosphorus since 2007. We've been doing septic system monitoring since 2006. And that's a very successful program. A lot of them have been replaced. And those that do not comply, they end up in a courtroom. So it's been a very successful program. In the future, should this CAFO go in, the Rome Water Utility and the Tri-Lakes Management will install 4 wells right in the northern border of Adams County. The cost is $40,000, and $20,000 is coming from the utility and $20,000 from Tri-Lakes. If need be, 1 may be installed further south in the future. Right now, the 4, if they go in, will be to monitor for nitrates, because right now we do phosphorus, but we'd be doing for nitrates. The one to the south, if it goes in, would be to monitor water flow, to see what's coming in. On the bottom there, more citizen nitrate monitoring. John here has volunteered his time to do monitoring on his own. CAFO concerns, as Don said, decreasing lake levels. We are in that 3 Mile Cone depression, which could affect our wells. The experience of the lakes to the east, you heard Don talk about, he saw some pictures. I can remember we used to come up here, we'd come in through Highway 21, and just before we got into Plainfield, there were 2 lakes on each side of 21. You drive there now, there's nothing there anymore. Those are Plainfield lakes. 2 lakes by the restaurant, those 2 are gone. Again, the water quality, nitrates, we will start testing if need be. And again, phosphorus. You see what's the algae in our lakes currently. What we have right now on Camelot, Sherwood, Arrowhead. We have algae problems right now. So it could get worse. 14 Mile Creek tree line would be to the south. This field right here is on the other side of that tree line, which is where the cows come to feed and to make cow pies. It is very close to the proximity to this 14 Mile Creek. So any heavy rains or anything, you know where some of this stuff is going, right in 14 Mile Creek. This is, again, 14 Mile Creek. This is to the west of 6th Avenue, okay? This is where the 14 Mile Creek spills in, which goes into our lake. There's a bulkhead there. They're made out of 2x6. I don't know how many there are, but I'll say it probably blocks 4 to 6 feet of water flow. Over here is a bulkhead installed probably by the gentleman that owns that farm. I don't know if it's a cranberry farm or cow farm, but they divert water through that bulkhead into ponds for their operation, depriving us water from the 14-mile creek. Now, they have to have a certain amount of flow that come in here. But this is an issue I'm trying to address with our county as to why this is happening. If you were to take a ride, let me say D, going east to 6th Avenue, and you turn right there, the pavement then turns west. But if you stayed straight onto that gravel road, you'd see ponds and ponds and ponds of water that have been diverted out of that 14-mile creek. So those are some of the issues we have to face today.
Mr. Wysocki dropped his bomb, that being the application for this CAFO. The Wisconsin DNR saw to it that he filled out some paperwork. One of the first things that he had to do was an environmental impact report. The impact report was developed by supposed experts. And I say that because the report got turned back like a teacher turns back an incomplete assignment to a student a number of times by the DNR. The report takes care of telling the DNR what the issues are regarding the CAFO's imposition on the environment and the citizens of the area that the CAFO stands in. That report took a long time to prepare. And as I said before, it got turned back a couple of times. Once the DNR did receive the report, and once they were satisfied that the report was complete enough for them to actually assess, that's what they did. And what they actually, I believe, are continuing to do. Their answer to the environmental impact report is called an environmental impact statement. Lots of letters here and lots of confusion amongst a lot of people, but what goes on here is that the DNR then goes ahead and reads what Mr. Wysocki and company had to say regarding the environment, and they then take their own tact on this thing and write up a report, a statement, and issue it to the public. We've had delays on that. We've actually alerted the public several times that we expected the DNR to issue this environmental impact statement, and time after time after time, it's been delayed. Number of reasons for that, kind of interesting reasons in my opinion. Some of them regarding little missing parts of the puzzle, things that weren't completely clear, some questions that went back and forth between the DNR and the Wysocki group. I've kind of alluded to that before, but that did go on. The analysis, once it is complete, and it's not yet complete, we've actually been notified a couple of times, 3 times in the last 6 months that I know of, that the publishing of the report was imminent. Once it's done, it'll be made public, and then the public will have about 45 days in which to answer and put input of their own into what the DNR has issued regarding all of these issues that occur or may occur with the environment. Now, once that happens, when we get the EIS, the citizenry is going to be busy reading this thing. The environmental impact report that the Wysockis gave to us was consisted of about 1,400 pages. And it's expected that the answer from the DNR is going to be very similar in its volume. You can imagine that it's going to take us a bunch of days to get something cogent to be able to talk about when the hearing comes about regarding this thing. And that's the next event that we'll be doing after the publishing of the thing. They will give us a public hearing, and we will have a chance to voice our concerns. We also have the chance to do that in writing and by email. The impact statement itself will be on the ground for probably 30 days or thereabouts, at which time the hearing will take place. It's expected that the hearing will take place at the Performing Arts Center in Wisconsin Rapids. That holds about 800 seats. This is a point where I want to make a plea to you folks. This is a situation that has very possible effect on the DNR and on our approval. The likelihood of approval for this thing is somewhat in question. It's not a foregone conclusion that it's going to happen, but on the other hand, we don't know that it's not. So anything that you can do in regard to your duty as a citizen, input-wise, is really, really, really important. Once it's done, once we have that situation done, the DNR will take a look at what everybody's had to say, and it will eventually publish its final determination. And that then will be the basis for permitting. We have two major permits that are going to take place if this thing happens, if it runs. The first one is the water Icap well permits. I'll be talking a little bit about legislation regarding those things in a little bit, but it's good to know right now that we've been evaluating impacts. The slide says to the 10 and 7 mile creeks, along with impacts to private wells. We've already heard about the idea that, not the idea, the fact that our water is going to be dropping as this thing takes place. And a couple of people prior to me have alluded to our water testing. I'm a Johnny-come-lately to the group, but I've joined in doing water sampling. We're sampling the flows of water so that we can have a baseline, so that we know exactly, and so that we can tell the state and legal authorities what might occur and what has occurred, so that we have a position to move from if this thing should happen. The same thing, I'm doing the same thing down here in Rome. The water sampling that's been taking place prior has been done on the 10 and 7 mile creeks, which run right through the proposed CAFO. Those creeks are very likely to have a situation where they're going to dry up just like the Little Polar River has done a number of times. Those things are going to be taken into consideration, hopefully, by the DNR. What can they do? I'm not in a position to tell you what they can do. I don't quite believe that the DNR knows exactly what it's going to do. The next permit thing is regarding the discharge of pollutants. In other words, it's a poop permit. And again, it's the same sort of a thing. With 55 million gallons of liquid manure and it's 25,000 tons of solid manure, it's a big job to decide how it can be done and whether it can be done, whether the land can actually take that much without poisoning man and animals. Once those things are completed, then the DNR will again have a hearing where the public will have a chance to have some say. It's more likely, or I shouldn't say it's more likely, it is likely that the hearing for these permits, along with the EIS, will take place on the same day at the same location. We're going to have a very short period of time to divulge a lot of information to the DNR regarding all of this. So it's something not to look forward to, but it's a duty that I believe we all have. It's something to get ready for. So I'll hand it over to Don, and he can pass it along.
Once a CAFO permit is requested, they start breaking ground within 6 months. It's been 4 years. And the reason I bring that up is because we have been told, and this is primarily the Saratoga people who have done this, they have launched the strongest fight against a proposed CAFO in Wisconsin history. And that's why here we are 4 years later, and there is not a CAFO in place. And it's also the reason, as John mentioned, that the DNR is having a real struggle trying to approve the EIS, is that they know that their feet are being held to the fire. There are some very, very strong environmental attorneys hired by the town of Saratoga, and there's people like you turning up. You know, we had 500 people turn up in January. Saratoga, they have meetings and they have hundreds of people turning up. There are probably 800 to 1,000 people in an email string who, when something happens, they are made aware of it. So I think later John's going to talk about the fact that there's been a lot of people turning up in Madison as well. So anyhow, let me get to my piece. How does this concern Rome? Here's some water quality experience with other CAFOs. Central Sands Dairy, we've talked a lot about that. That's the one in Armenia that's just across the river from us, about 6 miles across the Piedmont. And so the neighboring wells, as I mentioned earlier, were tainted with nitrates. And these are people who live off that CAFO, but not too far away. And they've had nitrates up in the 40s, where again, the state and federal limit is 10 parts per million for healthy drinking water. The farm itself, in its monitoring well, has had a nitrate reading of 77 parts per million against, again, that state and federal standard of 10 parts per million. Kewaunee County, there are 15 CAFOs there. Kewaunee County is an absolute mess. Sits immediately below Door County, as many of you know. 34% of the public's private drinking water wells are unusable because of E. coli and other elements from manure. So think about this. 1 of every 3 people here, you know, would have a bad well, potentially, if we were like Kewaunee. Here's from the Milwaukee Journal. Manure spills in 2013, the highest in 7 years statewide. I'm not sure what the stats are from 2014-15. I happen to grab this because I have that article. But it shows a trend. There are more and more CAFOs. The DNR enforcement is down 50%. So they have fewer people to go out and do the enforcement and more farms to try to enforce. From Fox News, DNR says a manure spill may impact groundwater. This happened in December of 2014, of a spill. A 2-mile-long manure spill breaches a trout stream in Grant County. I think a lot of you read about this. This was in the Wisconsin State Journal in February of 2016. And I'll remind you, Rome is directly next door to this CAFO. So this is actually one of my favorite slides, but I apologize, it is so hard to read. But this was actually developed by one of the engineering guys down in Adams County. And what he did is he took each of those high-cap wells that are proposed in that Golden Sands Dairy, and just to give you an idea, this is Highway 73. This is Highway 13, kind of giving a perspective of where we are. I know it's hard to see, but this purple line here is like a concentric line that follows where all these 33 high-cap wells would be located. And so this is the 1-mile mark. Here's the 2-mile mark. Here's the 3-mile mark. Here's the 4-mile mark. So if you subscribe to that 3-mile Kona depression, there are 1,497 private drinking water wells within that 3-mile Kona depression. This is the town of Rome down here. I live up here on Rome Water. The Rome Water Utility well is 2.3 miles from that proposed CAFO. Here are some of the other wells within Rome and some within Saratoga that could potentially be affected. So that's very concerning. The other thing I would point out about this is the Peaton well right here. That's kind of Wisconsin flowing down there. Over here is the Armenia CAFO that we've talked about a couple of times. And one thing I want you to notice here is look for the yellow dots. There are probably a dozen yellow dots around that area of this existing CAFO from which they would pattern the one they proposed for Saratoga here. You look at those few dots compared to our area, get an idea of just how population dense we are. So in terms of water quality, this is one of my pictures that I took in 2012. 2012 was a bad year. All of our lakes were low. This one, this is a beautiful lake in Hancock, a lot of properties around it. And just look at how much water they lost. Again, they're surrounded by Icap wells there. Here's a picture of, I think this, Christy probably had this in her video. This is what they do. I used to think that water coming out of these high-cap pivot wells was pure, clean water. And then I started seeing those little white tanks, and that's where they put some of the fertilizer. But then when I heard that they take the slurry out of the manure tanks and pump it through there to irrigate their crops or fertilize their crops, it really concerned me. And I would point out, as somebody did, in Adams County, a group of us on a citizen advisory committee convinced our county to regulate the aerial spraying of manure. Wood County has refused to do that, and so they're immediately above us. Shame on them, really. So the particulate drift from aerial manure spraying, there was a workshop that was done over the past couple of years, done by the UW Extension, and our hope is that they would come out of that with some regulation or restrictions, and what they really came out of it with was some best practices for the use of aerial spraying manure, but they kind of ignored the chemistry or the pathogens and the health aspects. There are many studies that have been done. The results just are widespread. Some studies say that the pathogens will flow a quarter mile beyond. Others have said a couple of miles beyond. Adams County, again, limits of practice. We're told, and actually John happens to live at Highway Z, and he tells me that he can smell that CAFO across 6 miles away across the Petenwell. People in Nakusa tell me that they smell it 11 miles away. So for a recreational community like ours, I don't think that's good. And then the CAFO impact on property values. And this comes from a number of different studies. Actually, it's interesting. One of the studies said for rural agricultural land, it actually goes up in value when a CAFO moves in. And that's primarily because almost every CAFO that's moved into Wisconsin doubles down within a couple of years. So they have, let's say, 4,000 cows, and once they get established, then they either buy up or contract for more land, and they double down on the cows, so they end up with 8,000. So the local agriculture people or farmers actually come out pretty well on it. People with homes like ours are not so good. In Iowa, and this has to do with rural homes, so it's not directly applicable to our situation here, but if you're 2 miles from the CAFO, 17% in property value drop, 2.5 miles, 15%, 3 miles, 6% drop. And so those are from studies in Iowa, and again, those are rural homes. We're residential here, so I can only surmise that ours would drop quite a bit more. And here's some evidence of it. In Saratoga, here are 3 instances. Bill Frank, a man I came to know, they wanted to move back to where their family is in the Milwaukee area, and so they had a very nice home on 10 Mile Creek, which would be right in the midst of where that CAFO would be. They bought it, they had about $300,000 invested when they bought it in 2007. He had it for sale over the past 3 summers, had only one taker who made an offer of $223,000, and they took it. So they lost 25% over, what, 6-7 years, something like that, just on the threat of a CAFO moving in. Then there's the Janik family who got a job transfer. They had to sell their home. They sold it at 27.5% under their 2010 appraisal. The Frendels, 31.5%. They also had to move on to different jobs. Now, I'm not saying that all of our homes would go that way, but what I'm saying is that here are some examples of what's happened just on the threat of a CAFO. Population density, there's well over 2,000 residences within the 3 miles of this CAFO. And again, that sister farm in Armenia, there's a few dozen. I mean, the difference here is just, it's amazing. We are an existing residential recreational area. We've been here for years. And think about the things that Bob talked about, all the great things going on in our community that are based upon recreation. The new Sand Valley Golf Resort as an example. And we're a major contributor to Adams County #4 tourism rank. They're ranked #4 in per capita income, but they are number 18 in the state for overall tourism. And the fact of the matter is that this is the wrong place for a 5,300 car CAFO. Not to argue whether CAFOs are right, wrong, or anything, but this is a highly populated area and it doesn't work. So I'll turn it over to Jeff. Oh, one more thing I want to mention. In Christie's video, she had mentioned that there is a PayPal site. And so I want to make a little pitch to you. When the EIS comes that John talked about, what we want to do is we want to get out to the entire Rome community, and so we've arranged to get some hangers printed, and they're kind of like just that kind of an S-shaped thing that we can hang on people's doors, because as you know, our community is, most of us are, I am, but most of the people are not full-timers here. So we want to get out to every resident we can in Rome who could have an impact on this environmental impact statement. And so we're going to ask for some donations. If you're willing to, give us a few bucks, it'll help pay for the couple $100 we're going to spend for those hangers. Then the other request I would have for you is we need people to help doing that. As you know, Rome is spread out, and if we can have volunteers to help us when the time comes, as John said, we're not real sure yet because the EIS keeps slipping. But when we have a firm date for the EIS, we need to get people to that meeting that's going to be held at the PAC Center because that's our one chance to really push this thing. And one thing I'd say about that is, if you read the newspaper and you see all the articles, and for some who are on my email list, I share articles about it, and the thing I cannot hammer loudly enough is that the efforts that we expend today maybe keep us from fighting a manure problem down the road in a year or two. So I'm going to pass these things around, and hey, if you're willing to help us pay for those hangers, I'd appreciate it. Thanks, John.